Hi, this is Sid from GitLab. I'm here today with Rick Lamers. And Rick, maybe you can introduce yourself. We're going to have a conversation about open core. Take it away, Rick.
Thanks, Sid. So my name is Rick. I am Dutch, and I'm working on a startup around an open source project that we introduced called Gridstudio. The current focus of the project is to make it easier for data scientists to build predictive models, and we have some ideas about how to do it, but we also want to learn more about how to commercialize it. We think if we want to provide a nice product with a great user experience, that we also need to commercialize it to be able to have funding for attracting good people. So we looked at GitLab and we thought they know what they're doing. Apparently, they're doing quite well. And I would love to ask a few questions to you, Sid, about the open core model and how to make it work.
For sure.
So let's jump into the first question, which is how do you decide actually if you are an open core project, which features you make available for free and which parts do you leave out, the open core, the open source offering?
Great question. This was really hard for us. We did many things. First, we did like stages, and then we did by maturity of the feature set. We did by scale of the company. All of them didn't work. And we settled on something that we call buyer-based open core. Depending on who the buyer is and what features they care about, we monetize them or not. If the buyer is an individual contributor, if the individual contributor cares a lot about the features, they're open source. And then if it's a manager, a director, or an executive, depending on that, they get into one of our pricing plans. So, for example, executives care about company-wide governance. So company-wide governance dashboard, where you can see of every project, like, are they running all the tests? Are they running all the security tests? Are things signed off? That is an executive. An executive cares most about that feature, a CISO in a company, for example. And then the entire company, every user in the company has to pay the highest price for GitLab because they are the people who can decide to spend more. And by aligning the pricing and the features with the buyer, we found that there's the least friction. There's still friction and there's still debate about who cares most about a feature, but it's been better than any other model we had.
It sounds very interesting. And does that mean that some companies don't get some features or don't pay for some features, that there's differentiated pricing or?
Yeah, for sure. When we started GitLab, it was completely open source. When we joined YC, 1% of the users were paying, and now about 10% of the organizations are paying. We have over 100,000 organizations using GitLab and about 10,000 of them paying.
That's interesting. Well, we'll take into account who was buying Gridstudio, and then we'll tailor and see if that works for us. You know, it's always a try. Another question is, I've heard this from people who I had discussed open core with. They told me, if you go the open core route, you probably won't be able to monetize from small to mid-cap companies. It will only be enterprise that you can really monetize.
Yeah, we tried. That's not been our experience. Like, we tried for a while to kind of monetize for the bigger companies. We found no really significant difference in the features they wanted. Even the small companies wanted to ship secure code. Even small companies needed certain approvals. So that's not been our experience. I think it's very hard to run a hybrid go-to-market motion. So having a sales organization that serves both the smaller organizations, the SMB, and the enterprise. For example, enterprise sales reps really need to speak with the customer. One way to do that is to not display your price, because then the customers get in touch and you get that opportunity. SMB, you cannot afford to have a rep talk with them. So you have this struggle, like, what do we do? Now, GitLab is easy. We are a transparent company, so we'll always display our pricing. But other companies really have to choose. At GitLab, it's now SMB is self-serve and we answer questions. Mid-market is inside sales. So we do reach out and we have people reaching out, but they do not visit the customer. And then the top of the market is enterprise with its field sales force supported by solution architects. And that's 72% of our revenue. So what we could have done is just focus exclusively on that. It wouldn't make a giant difference in our revenue, but we think it's important to serve every part of the market, because otherwise your future competitors will first serve SMB and then move up.
Yeah. Well, actually, we are thinking of competing with some of our competitors, because we're definitely not alone in the machine learning space, as you might imagine.
Yep.
That we will compete with some of them by moving on the SMB market, because we think there's a lot left desired there. So that will be our market approach. And I think you reiterating the fact that you don't want to move on all markets at the same time because they strictly require different approaches reconfirms our intuition that we should be focusing on the first. In the beginning, at least.
Yeah, I didn't say that we moved on all markets at the same time, but it's harder. So it makes total sense to start in SMB. And if you want to know more, like the book Innovator's Dilemma is great and describes this in detail.
Good.
Or just read an abstract.
That will be faster, but I have some time. So remote teams, I have a few questions about this as well. Might not directly be open core, but I think if you're an open core company, you deal with contributors at the very least.
Yep. Yeah. One big advantage of being all remote is that our contributors are kind of on the same level. We're all working from the same issue track, and that's been super helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really incredible. So we want to be based in Europe, and we also want to sell to North America, for example. But we believe that there are extremely good people all over the world, and we want to have access to those people. But we are not certain, how should you deal with the early stage of the company? Would you then still recommend you have a very spread out team from the very beginning? Or do you think it doesn't matter?
I think time zones are hard. It's just hard if you have little overlap in your day and it slows you down. And in the beginning, you tend to have more adjustments to the course of the company. So in the beginning, we were very Europe heavy. And we even had 3 months during YC. We were all like in the same building, sleeping and working. So that's what we did. So I do think if you're like a 7-person team, there's nothing better than being in the same room together.
Yeah.
I think
that's what we feel as well.
Yeah. So I won't count against that. I think what's interesting is kind of the advantages of being co-located. They fade away as you get bigger. And if you adopted all remote from the beginning or early in your company, you're going to adjust your practices to be conducive to that. And that's a big plus as you start scaling.
I think that's so interesting, because I was discussing with someone the other day about the difficulty of having remote teams. And then I said to them, well, I worked in a 200-person organization. They weren't remote first, but at that scale even, it was super hard to keep track of what was going on. And I noticed that in GitLab, because everything is so accessible, even at that size, I think you already see advantages of thinking as a remote first company, because everything is documented.
For sure. So like the team in one room cannot be beaten by remote. The team on one floor, meh. Team on multiple floors, huh?
Yeah.
Team on multiple buildings, yeah. Team on multiple cities, yeah. Team over different continents, we got you beat. So it's nice. I wouldn't be fanatic about like saying, oh, you got to do all remote from like the very first start. If you're at 7 people, it makes total sense to sit in a room together.
We are in a field that is highly competitive. Like data science requires people who are extremely talented at what they do to be able to provide value in that area, because the people in the area are already quite smart. So yeah, we see it as a necessity to get access to the people we would love to work with.
Yeah. By the way, when we were like 7 people, we were all remote. Everyone worked from home. It's just that the time zones were much better.
Yeah.
Much more overlap.
Time zone alignment is an important consideration. So this question is about product market fit. We are in the early stages and we think we have something interesting, but we need to confirm that by seeing how many users start adopting it. Did you have a moment for you that you said, well, if there's something like product market fit, that's what we just experienced at GitLab?
It wasn't as clear with GitLab. It's just that I did a show Hacker News and 300 people signed up. So I thought that was validation, but then nobody wanted to pay. So people want to use, but not pay, which is not so helpful if you're starting a business. And then I just got but I got some inbound emails from really interesting companies, like Fortune 1 companies, like, hey, can you help me with GitLab in different aspects, like features and maintenance? And that was like, this is weird. Why are these giant companies using this amateur hour product?
Yeah.
So I think that was great validation.
That was a signal.
That was the signal, and that wasn't. We didn't have the right offering, so they weren't throwing money our way or anything else.
There was something to look into.
There was something to it. So I think with an open source project, we're doing that now with Meltano. We're measuring monthly active users, and we want to see that grow 10% week over week. I think as long as you can do that, as you can keep on that 10% week over week track, you're good.
Yeah. We've been thinking, like, what is our first wave? Like, what's the first thing we want to do in like the next 12 months? And for us, it's just we want to make sure that people actually start using it and that it starts helping data scientists to build their predictive models. Yeah. And we're going to be all open source, like everything is going to be open and free in the beginning. And the investors we've spoken to, they really support this. So we'll be measuring and seeing if we get to that point where a lot of people start using it, and then maybe that's called product market fit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think at a certain point you have big companies reaching out with requests that if you keep that buyer-based open core model in mind, you're like, yeah, this is kind of a feature that managers or directors or executives would actually care about. Yeah. And then that's playing because, like, hey, you're going to put that behind the paywall. And for us, it was like those Fortune 10 companies were kind of the trigger to that. They started asking things, so we're like, hey, this is okay. LDAP login was already in the product, but LDAP group synchronization, hey, that makes sense as a paid feature. So you don't have to think about what features you're going to monetize, like think the features up. You just have to select from the incoming stream of requests, just see what features come from buyers, like, and don't look specifically at the companies, look at like the position of the person at the company. Although I must say we were dealing with individual contributors at most of those big companies.
I think that's really useful practical advice, because you can directly do this and see if it works. It's very clear how you should do it. Another question I have is, but when we are in this process of starting a startup, we get a lot of advice. We ask for a lot of advice, but we also get a lot of advice. How do you deal with advice? Like, how do you filter out? What do you take into account? How do you mix it?
Yeah, super hard. First of all, like, is the person like qualified to opine on this? Have they done it before? Second of all, the circumstances in which they did it, are they similar to yours? Like, B2C and B2B are very, very different endeavors. So that might lead to very different advice. And it's, look, if you're hearing the same thing from everyone, it's probably right. If you're hearing different things, you've probably done enough digging and you can just make up your own mind.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been using from the things you mentioned, and the other things I can start using more, but that, like, I try to understand, do they come from a position where they really have the experience and authority to give advice on this particular topic? Because I notice even like super smart people, they will say something in an area that they don't really understand a lot about, and then people still take their
there's more smartness in the valley and in the tech industry than there's experience. There's only, so you gotta, I'd value experience over smartness in taking advice.
Good. So this one is more of a practical question from a technology perspective, so it might be more fun. It's about tech. So we're thinking about our stack, and we don't want to overcomplicate our stack so that we have like a C++ code base where we need specialists and it slows us down. But we also want to understand when to like opt for a low-level language if it makes sense.
Yep.
Do you generally have advice about startups and how they go about their tech stack?
I would optimize everything for speed. Like, I think it's all about building an appealing product, and then performance problems you can solve later on. We're now hitting that point. We got It's not good. We're starting up a special team, just a performance team, to make things multi-threaded. GitLab is now 30 different services that you run. So we're able to kind of spin out things. But it's so much, if you're going to take like the effort to write something in a more like verbose language, like Go, it's so much easier if you already have like a template and know exactly what you're going to make. So you want to kind of do almost the prototyping in a high level language and then implement it in a low level language, and only the parts that are performance critical. And the thing with performance, and you probably know this, but measure, like it's amazing how wrong your intuition tends to be on performance. So it's all about measure, improve, measure again, and do it that way. I'm not, David Knut, I think, said premature optimization is the mother of all evil. I strongly subscribe to that. So just go with a high level language, get as much out as you can, and then where it starts hurting, start spinning that out in lower level languages. That would be my advice, because speed and velocity is all you got. That's the only advantage you have as a startup. So don't blunt that advantage.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we thought that it would be better to start in a high level language because of the rapid iteration speed we could be able to gain, and you confirming this.
Yep.
Well, so a more general question. I'm just interested from your perspective. What are your thoughts on machine learning?
It's such a broad question. I don't know. I just watched in the NVIDIA presentation from I think it was even last year. But just the rapid improvement in the field of machine learning and AI is so amazing. Like the Cambrian explosion of different models, the 5x year-over-year gain in speed and complexity. It says something that like OpenAI had to become like semi for profit, because otherwise they'd run out of money. Like there's billionaires supporting that cause, but it's just, we just learned that the more compute we throw at something, the better it's going to be. I'm talking a bit more AI now. I think machine learning, we're kind of starting to play in the data space with Meltano ourselves, which is not machine learning, but I think machine learning, you need good data. And I think getting the good data and cleaning that up is the biggest problem. There's amazing companies like Trifecta that like focus on data wrangling. I think that's most of the smart machine learning people tend to, and most of the machine learning people tend to spend 80% of their time just cleaning up their data. As far as I know, I'm not very experienced here. So it's the data wrangling seems to be underappreciated in the industry.
Okay, yeah, we agree. And that's why we also make it a priority in Gridstudio when you build these pipelines, because a lot of those pipeline steps are not actually training the model.
Great.
Okay, so I only have a final question, and this is more of a recommendation. Do you know of seed stage investors that are really good match for open core companies specifically? Because we want someone who's like philosophically aligned.
Yeah, I think seed investors are more open to it these days. I'm not sure there's a philosophical alignment. I think it's really important to consider, like, as long as you hit your goals, no one's going to make you do something you don't want. If you don't hit your goals, all bets are off. You just lost control. So the way to stay in control is to set ambitious goals that you hit. And I don't think there's a way that like, oh, this investor has super warm, fuzzy feelings with open source, and therefore it's going to be okay. Good investors are also, they're not jittery. Like if you miss a quarter, they're not going to be jumping up and down. We missed a quarter by 20% at a certain point. And the only thing the board said was, Sid, don't do any crazy things. As in, don't change your terms in order to bring in some extra revenue or stuff like that. So that's good investors. They don't get.
How do you kind of like identify that behavior before experiencing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in this case, there's were venture capitalists. They were on our board. They were, and you reference people. They all know how to do the talk. So the best thing to do, and it takes more time, but it is worthwhile. You you ask them for a complete record of their past investments.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly not public information, so they have to supply that. And yeah, don't do that with Peter Fenton. Like you can find out where he invested in, but like if they're a bit less known,
there was an open core as well.
Yeah, just give them. But the important thing is to ask for a complete record, and then just call with the failed companies, and those CEOs will tell you whether they're good or not. You built your track record with the failed companies, and that's the not so nice thing about being a VC. You end up spending a lot of time at companies that are not going to be the greatest of your return. So it's a weird time allocation, but they will tell you whether they did the right thing when it was tough. In a good company, there's no tough decisions.
I think that's actually quite actionable advice. I somehow feel like if I'm talking to a VC that I know is kind of famous, for example, in the Bay Area, I'm visiting SF right now, then I feel like me going asking them, can you give me a full list, like all the failures as well of your entrepreneurs, and I will start calling them to see if you're any good. I don't know, it feels a bit out of place because I'm just get.
I think if you're getting close to a term sheet, that's a very appropriate question. And good VCs will actually say this, they will volunteer this. So you can even ask, it's a good question, hey, what would be the best way to reference you? And any good VC will say, ask me for my failed company, start calling the CEOs. That is the default answer. And also call a few of the ones that worked out really well, where they had a big impact, just for fun. Just for fun, and also important for your network to know people who succeeded, because that's data too. But they won't, you can't ask this like in the first meeting, but if you're getting close and
after a few conversations,
if you schedule the full partner meeting, then I think it starts being appropriate asking this question.
Okay. Yeah, we're moving towards that. So,
and then I don't have any open source seed investors. I think that's almost too big of a focus. Good seed investors are broad because you need a lot of volume, so they don't focus on a specific area. I want to give 3 names in this public setting. Liquid 2, the Joe Montana's fund, has been our most helpful seed investor. So they're really, really good. SV Angel from Ron Conway is generally regarded in the Valley to be the best seed investor. And 1984, run by my friend Rami, I think very highly of him as a person.
Okay, I love that. Like I've learned that it's a lot about the people. So
yeah, this VC is very much a people business. It's my default track, so I'll probably become one, but I'm not really. I don't think I would be as good. I care more about a bigger organization running that at scale, and VCs kind of do things that don't scale, namely their own time.
They spend time with the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and they go find new hires, and they.
I think for you, there's probably plenty of interesting stuff to do with GitLab as well first.
What do you mean?
Like I said, I think you said it wasn't for you.
Yeah, no, there's enough to do, but for me, the name of the game is to try to delegate as much as I possibly can, and VCs don't have that luxury. Cool. Well, thanks so much for this interview.
We went through. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.